Hi and welcome to the video. Today I want to talk about a topic that was brought up by many of you either in the comments or via email, and that is basically if you shoot now a Canon mirrorless camera like the EOS R5, R6 Mark II, R7 or whatever, should you invest in the more expensive RF glass, or can it be a nice alternative to still buy some EF glass which was designed for DSLRs and which you can still use with this adapter? And I have some thoughts about this, and I want to explain a bit my thoughts in this video and tell you which kind of lenses might be interesting to buy and what I would not recommend. So if you recently switched from a DSLR to a mirrorless camera from Canon, one important thing that I noticed is that from my experience, all the Canon glass that I had performed at least as good on the mirrorless cameras than it did on the DSLRs. So there was no downside of adapting the old EF glass to my mirrorless camera. On the opposite, I felt like I was even happier with the results I got from my EF 600mm f4 LIS of the second generation, because coupled with the R5, I just got some flight shots that I would not have imagined are possible. The autofocus just got better somehow with the lens, and I was very happy with it. So if you are migrating from DSLR to mirrorless and you already have some EF glass that you are happy with, I would not directly sell it. Just adapt it with this adapter to the mirrorless camera, see if you are still happy with it. You will probably be, and then you can still upgrade and think about maybe you want another type of lens that you want to upgrade to or whatsoever. However, if you want to buy a new lens anyway, or you don't even have a telephoto lens so far, then it gets a bit more interesting to think about whether you should go for an EF lens or the more expensive RF lens. So first of all, I think there is no general answer whether it's a good decision to buy EF glass or RF. In most of the situations, it probably comes down to price, because the EF glass is much cheaper nowadays because the lenses tend to be older and they are not, well, the demand is not so high anymore, because now most people, I think, shoot mirrorless in the, at least from the people I know in the wildlife photography sector, that I also have people that come to my workshops, most of them shoot mirrorless. So therefore the prices here are much lower. In general, I think for most of the cases, basically for all of the cases, I would not buy EF lenses new anymore. For me, it's not worth it. The difference in price, it might be big in some cases. So if you think about the EF 600mm f4 LIS of the third generation and compare it to the RF 600mm f4 LIS, yes, the difference might still be $1,000 to $1,500 or whatever, depending where you live. But honestly, if you already spend more than 10,000 for a lens, I would go for the newest version. However, it could become interesting for used lenses, because the used market is getting bigger and bigger, because many people sell their EF lenses and upgrade to RF lenses. And if more people sell, the value of this, or the price of these EF lenses, is going to drop. And this means that there might be some nice offers. So if you're on a bit a smaller budget, a tighter budget, I think it can be a very interesting alternative, and you can invest this saved money in maybe another lens, in a trip, in a photography workshop, or something that helps you to get better pictures or just have fun. So Canon announced the RF mount together with the first camera, the EOS R, back in 2018, so around 6 years ago. And since then they have been continuing to put out more and more RF glass. But if I recall correctly, all of this RF glass is still first generation, meaning that there is no successor. And this makes it very hard to actually buy used RF glass. This is why I'm focusing on advising to buy EF glass used, because there is just more options. And as I mentioned, you can get some quite nice deals. So of course, it always depends a bit which exact lens you look for, and I cannot go through all of the lenses here, but in general, a trend that we see when we compare EF glass to the newer RF glass is that the RF glass tends to be lighter, often a bit more compact, not always, but also often better image quality, especially in the corners of the frame. Basically always better autofocus performance and better image stabilization. So again, the only thing that really points to the EF glass or puts the EF glass in favor is the price point. And it's really important to think about how important these specific points are to you. If you, for example, shoot a lot from a height, you don't walk a lot, you basically drive there by car, you walk maybe 200-300 meters to the height and then you stay there, you shoot from a tripod, maybe you don't need the best image stabilizer and half a kilo more or less doesn't matter so much. And in these situations, it can be, of course, very interesting to buy a used EF lens. One example that comes to mind here is the EF 600mm f4 LIS of the second generation, or also the 400mm f2.8 LIS of the second generation. They are still great lenses. I have used my EF 600mm f4 of the second generation until like 1 year ago, and it served me very well, and I now sold it to somebody who has taken a photography workshop with me a few years ago. So he actually borrowed the lens back then already for a few shots and he liked it and he bought it now, and it was a huge upgrade for him. For me, I switched to the RF 600mm f4, and of course I was happy about the better image stabilizer, especially in the rainforest, about less weight to carry around. If I walk around with the lens for hours, you start to feel the difference. I also noticed that the autofocus is a bit better. In terms of image quality, in this case, no difference. Even the old one might have been slightly sharper, but for me it was worth the upgrade. But he, on the other hand, could save I think around 5,000 bucks or something compared to the new RF lens for still having a very good lens, and I think this is a very nice option. Another lens that I still have here, one of my few EF lenses, is the 70-200 2.8 LIS, again of the second generation, and it still works fine. I had the RF 70-200mm f2.8 as well to test, and of course it's much lighter, bit better autofocus, better image stabilizer, a bit sharper, but you can pick one of these up for less than half of the price of the new RF version. And I think this can again be interesting if you shoot maybe from a monopod, or if you don't mind having a bit of extra weight and you can really invest this extra money in something else. So far I was talking exclusively about Canon EF lenses. With third-party manufacturers I would be a bit more careful, because I just made the experiences with some Sigma lenses, the most important one probably being the Sigma EF 150-600mm contemporary lens. I just was not happy with the performance. The image quality was not bad, of course not on par with the RF 100-500, but it was not bad. But the problem was the autofocus. It was really struggling, and even when using single point autofocus in low light, it just had no chance of focusing, where the RF 100-500 would easily grab the subject. So that was quite a difference, and I would not recommend using this lens on a mirrorless camera from Canon. I would rather go for a used EF lens, even if it's 100-400mm of the second generation, which obviously is shorter, but I think you will just have more fun with it. However, I still use some third-party manufactured lens on my Canon EOS R5, one actually from Sigma, and that's the 150mm macro lens, just because I don't do macro often enough to justify the jump to the RF 100mm 2.8, and also for my style of shooting, 100mm is almost a bit short. Another one that I still like to use is here this Samyang 24mm 1.4. It's a manual focus lens, so there can be no complication with autofocus because it has no autofocus. So this works just as well as with the DSLRs. In fact, I have now the focus peaking with this lens, which I didn't have with DSLRs if I remember correctly. So it actually got a bit better. One more thing that I would also consider, even though I often don't think too much about it, is the repairability of the lens, or basically how long you can get spare parts for it, and it will be serviced by Canon, because at some point the lenses just get old, and after, I don't know, it depends on the lens, maybe 20-30 years, Canon will stop the support, and then if you have something broken, you cannot fix the lens anymore. So that might be also something to keep in mind. And I would also not completely underestimate the weight. If you come from, let's say, the Sigma 150 to 600 millimeter contemporary that I mentioned before, and you want to go for a prime lens that offers a nicer background blur, I would take, if you can, invest in something a bit more expensive and go for the EF 500 millimeter f4 LIS of the second generation, or the 600 millimeter f4 LIS second generation. But I would not go for the first generation, because they were just very heavy and the image stabilizer was not so good. And these things combined, I think I would rather steer away from them and try to save a bit more money and then go for the second generation. That's really a generation of super telephoto lenses that I can still highly recommend. Are there specific EF lenses that you still use with your mirrorless cameras and are either very happy about or don't like it at all? Let me know in the comments, and see you in the next video.